Just being 6:03, I'd like to call the Town Hall School Building Committee to order. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I know things are getting a little busy for everybody, so I appreciate you coming out. First item on our agenda, Johnson Roberts, the architects, will give a presentation on programs and adjacencies in the interior with possible committee vote tonight. Phil? What would you need? And full,
All right,
yeah.
so I'm going to touch on programming first. I've given you all a copy of this program. I don't expect you to be able to read what I gave you necessarily or what's on the screen, but I just wanted to show you that what we have tried to do is break down all the different departments, and what we're looking at first is town administration is up at the top, so the town offices are up first, and then we have there's a section of blue, the town manager's office, and then there's green. And these colors, we try to carry over into the plan diagrams as well. So it's a two-page sheet, we have that there. There are some shared spaces that show up on here as well. We also tried to break the school department down into some smaller chunks as well, so that when they're looking at the plans, they make a little bit more sense. So this is a blow-up of, call it like the last. This is an example, so folks can understand how we put this together. And this is kind of like the last two-thirds of the right-hand side of the sheet. And so it doesn't show the departments or anything on there, but just gives you an idea about how we kind of came up with the numbers that we're recommending. You can see across the top, we've got occupants, and then in the second, on the right-hand side, there's furnishings and equipment. And basically what happens is, we're taking the square footage that we need for people, which is the occupant size, and that could be the size of the office that people are in, how many people are in that office, whether the office is shared, whether there's conference seating in there. Conference room seating has a certain square footage, and I'll point some of these things out for folks. So the different size offices are here, an additional space in an open office. So if it's a shared office, for example, there'll be one full-size office and then additional space in there for shared office for each additional person. There's another 80 square feet that's added. If there's conference room seating, that's at 20 square feet, and that's listed here. Meeting room seating is at 11 because the tables take up a lot more room in a smaller space. When it's just seating, you have a little, you don't need quite as much room. And then that all totals up here. The number of occupants is listed, and then we do the same thing for furnishings and equipment. And it's based on years of doing this, how much space each of these different things carries and requires. And so we put them all in there, and then we add them all up. The two different things are then totaled on the right, and then we add back over to the left, and that gives us our overall square footage. But then we take these totals and then we compare them to industry standards and what we have certainly seen in the past. And you folks are kind of right where you belong. We did a kind of initial check early on, kind of as a kind of square footage per population, and you're looking at under 2 square feet per person as a total town population, and that's actually a little bit under what we see of similar sized communities to you. So you're kind of where you want to be overall is the way it looks for us. So we've blown these up a little bit. You can see we've just taken kind of the occupancy or the people side of the equation, so you can see the totals, and then each of the departments. And so we've got the town manager's office, the town clerk's office, recreation, engineering, planning. These are all the departments that are in the town offices. And then there's town offices, what we're calling support spaces, and this is conference rooms and so forth. And then we also have more recently we've added the IT department for the town offices. That wasn't on the last time that we showed that to you. And then there's a subtotal down there. And then when we look at school administration departments are all listed there. There's conference room and support spaces are there. And then when we get down into shared spaces, which is kind of a third category, there's shared spaces that both departments will use inside the building, and there's some kind of coffee stations, copier and supply spaces, server rooms for the equipment and so forth. There's meeting rooms, so these are the larger meeting rooms that happen similar to the one that's in the center of this building. The large meeting room there, the large hearing room is the largest. And then there's a selectmen's meeting room here, cable TV and so forth. And then we've got storage spaces broken down by department. Then there's a cable studio. And then there's the subtotals again for each of these departments. And then we've added a multiplier on there, and that's called unassigned. And what basically that carries is all the different things that don't show up in the program specifically. So that'd be like a mechanical room, an electrical room, the corridors, the thicknesses of the walls, the stairs, the elevator, all that other stuff that we need in there. And for this size building, 35% is what we would normally carry. And that pretty much shakes out when we take a look at it in plans. Now, a couple of these things you'll notice are noted in red. And the reason is because we also did a survey, a questionnaire that we sent around all the different departments, and we got a lot of feedback from them in terms of what folks did, what folks needed, who they wanted to be adjacent to, and things like that. A lot of useful information. But one of the things we asked was how many meetings people had. Want to make sure you have the right number of meeting rooms in this building. And when we take a look at the way that people meet, we see that a lot of the school department folks, school administration, have small meetings in their offices. And so that probably means that they don't need as many small meeting rooms outside of their office, because a lot of those meetings happen in-house, right in their office. In the town offices side, there is a meeting room that's built in to the town manager's office, similar to the way you have it right now, and I think it makes sense to leave that, and so that probably means you probably don't need an additional room there. And so we've got a couple of different things here: conference room for school administration, cable TV room, recreational storage, and so forth. And if we take all those rooms, which we don't really think that you need or can be combined with something else in the building, it comes out to about 1,700 square feet. And if we pull that out, we've got a revised total square footage number of 41,055 square feet. And that's about 1,000 square feet or so under where you were looking, that was advertised, what your last study architect came up with when they were doing a master plan for the town. And again, that number works kind of overall, makes sense to us for what you're trying to do overall. And so we'd recommend making those changes that we're showing in red. It basically means that the meeting spaces that you have in each of the departments is essentially equivalent. The shared spaces that you have are equivalent. You have a cable studio inside the building at this point, and what we suggest is that you take the cable TV room that we would normally associate with a large meeting room like this, or the meeting room next door, and just combine that with that space there, and then try to keep them adjacent. It makes sense to have two different sets of equipment in two different parts of the building. So we're suggesting combining those, and so that's what those red numbers are. We didn't want to just eliminate them on there. We wanted to show you the last time we had them, that we presented this to you. Those were in there as black, something we were recommending. After looking at it a little bit more carefully, we think we can and should eliminate those spaces.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I noticed on the school side, you have service counter / waiting area, but I don't see it either on the town manager side or town clerk side, or is that something that is just unique to the school side of things, or?
There are public service counters for a lot of the departments, and you'll see that there's two different sizes of public service counter. It's in this column right here. And there's a public service counter that's 30 inches wide at 6 square feet, and a public service counter at 24 inches wide, which is 5 square feet. We typically use with the 30-inch ones. This is a 24-inch counter, and it doesn't really work for larger drawings and so forth. So things like the building department, assessors, and so forth, we give them a bigger counter so that when you put out a set of drawings, they don't black over the edges. So it's a little larger. And so a lot of the town offices have that. Not all of the town offices. And then in the school department, really just at the front where they're doing reception, there's a waiting area and a counter there.
Okay, but there's no waiting area in the town manager's office, or?
I think once we get into the next, as the layouts start to pop, then you'll get to see them. So why don't we hold some of our questions until then, so we're not just repeating some of them.
But Paul's question, you know, the town clerk does have 10 linear feet of counter space. So if you look under public counter, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 columns, or 9 or 10 columns over to the right.
Yep.
You'll see it on the master sheet. Recreation has a 10-foot counter. engineering has
I
a
see,
12-foot
I see,
counter,
I
but
see.
it's a
Okay.
36-inch wide counter.
I just wanna make sure we're
Yeah.
making accommodations for
Yeah.
that, that's all. Okay, great.
I mean, it's a good question, because it's not specifically identified like on the school
Yep,
side.
yep.
So on the, Oh.
Just one comment, I guess, is, George and I were contacted over the weekend. Ken Lord, who is a school IT director and also chair of the board of directors at WCTV, was planning to be here tonight because he wanted to be able to offer comment on the WCTV space needs. He had a personal circumstance that came up and was not able to be here, but I would suggest that we kind of reserve judgment, so to speak, on what is being proposed for WCTV until we give him an opportunity to weigh in.
Absolutely. For that and any of the IT server room or equipment he's going to need, so.
okay. Yeah, these aren't,
Right.
these aren't big changes, and if we're not talking about a room that's 500, 600, 700,000 square feet, we could keep on going with the planning, because I know that when we get halfway through schematic design and then again during design development, the next design phase, my engineers are gonna be asking for little rooms like that anyway. And there's enough built into the 35% multiplier that will allow for stuff like that. So,
I was just gonna say, I just on WCTV, I think what'll be interesting to me is, as many of you around the table know, they're currently housed over on Waltham Street. They have a very nice setup over there. I don't know offhand how many square feet of space they have, but it's a pretty sizable area. And you know, it'll be interesting to see how much space they're looking for. I have to believe it's maybe, I don't know, 6,000 or 7,000 square feet of space over there. So I don't suspect they're gonna have, you know, under any kind of situation here, be able to get that kind of space in a building like this. But again, I guess it remains to be seen what they really need.
Excuse me, Jeff, are you talking about replacing the building that they have in Waltham and bringing them over to the town hall? All, the whole studio?
My understanding is, and I don't wanna speak for them, but from what I gather, they've recognized for some period of time here that with the declining revenue from Comcast and Verizon, which is of course where they get 90%, 95% of their revenue, they're not gonna, in the long term, be able to afford the cost of leasing space over on Waltham Street. So my understanding is one of the reasons, and perhaps the principal reason, that they're interested in coming into a combined building is to lessen their costs, cost of operation, if they can be part of the town school admin building. So.
Oh, because I was over there, not too long ago, and, it's a big space. I
Right.
mean, I
I mean,
think
some
you're
of-
15,000 square feet, really,
Well,
that
maybe.
they've got. I mean, they, you know, where they actually do the recording and everything in the back, they have the big studio there in the back, and, yeah, I was amazed. I thought they were just going to have a room, you know, similar to what we put at the high school, maybe a little bit bigger. But I guess they're looking at something for a replacement, in other words, to take off that building completely and.
Yes, I believe so. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's, you know, certainly, Ken would be able to definitively say, but the impression that I've been under is that they, and I don't know how many more years they have on their lease, but my impression has been that they're looking to, at a point in time here, be able to find a home here in this new building potentially.
Wow, okay, all right.
Okay. Phil?
If I just, quick question, so with what you're showing here, it takes into account what we did in the
he also said something that was pretty important too. He said there's a gross, he didn't call it grossing factor, but a factor of 35, which we call a grossing factor, which is, you know, spaces that have not yet been defined, but we know will eventually have to be there, whether it's a box out for a structural column or ductwork or things like that, stairwells, elevators, all of those type of things go into what we call a grossing factor. And he's carrying a higher grossing factor, so that if we have to change some of these numbers as we develop the plan, it's not gonna be a big deal to do. And that's really important.
But it's not uncommon to have a program like this that actually, that you're feeling pretty good about and it seems like it's working pretty well. And then, in addition to this numerical approach, the next thing that we do, and I'm gonna show you that next is, and I guess I can just segue to that, is programming diagrams. And so, program diagrams, what we basically do is we take all the information that's contained in the program, and then we just draw them out in a simplified form. And so, these are the town offices, for example. And so what we've done is we've taken each of the line items that we have on here. And if there's a separate space, we've shown it as a separate space. If it's a shared space, we've shown it that way. So the square footage will line up, the furniture and so forth that we have on the program shows up in here as well. And it allows us to kind of have a second check to make sure that the spaces that we've calculated actually work in a form that you might put together that would make a usable room. Now, some of these things are spaces, and some of them are rooms that have walls and doors. For the most part, we tried to separate out the stuff that is a separate office, but there's a couple of departments that asked, for example, not to have a separate office. Now, that's a decision for you all to make, whether you'd rather satisfy that department head now, or if you say we're building for the future and we're gonna put the office in, and that person doesn't need it, or they can live with it the way that it is. That's not a decision for me to make, but that's really up to you all. But this is kind of the kind of cross-check to make sure that what we have on here makes sense. And if you look at this, and if you see there's anything that's missing, you can let us know. We made this document available to you as a PDF, and we also posted just today a PowerPoint, and there's links for both of those that we have sent in an email. This is the kind of what I would call the kind of the secondary look at the program. And once we go through this, sometimes we'll look at these things and we'll say, man, that seems like it all adds up on paper, but it seems a little crowded in that space. Or, man, it seems like we got way too much room in there. And the other thing I'll point out is that for clarity, is that in each of these departments, you'll see we've got a couple of spaces that are enclosed. And so, maybe it's better for me to come down and point at this one, more people can see it. We got a couple of spaces that are enclosed, and then a more open space, and then there's a lighter square in the background. The reason that lighter square is not additional space, it's just a simple representation of all the spaces in that department. Because I'm gonna show you some plan diagrams next, and we haven't put all the offices and furniture and everything on those plan diagrams. We just show these squares right now, because we're at that stage we're calling a bubble diagram, where we have these little bubbles of color, and we're really just moving them around, checking out things like adjacencies, what might go where, on what floor, and so forth on a multi-floor building. And so the different departments are represented kind of as an overall square footage, and then their square footage is shown for the different spaces inside that department as well. We'll get into that nitty-gritty as we go further along in the planning.
That corresponds with the color on your cover sheet. I know that was obvious, but.
We try to do that as much.
I'll say one thing, it's easy to follow.
Yeah.
This is a little easier than the
Very
the
intuitive.
chart, yeah. The other thing I will point out here is that we've got 3 different departments that have vault requirements. You've got one vault in this building now, and everybody shares it, and so I think it makes sense to do that. The Secretary of State has released vault standards for critical records. And it's a 6-hour rated vault, and they're complicated to build, and they're kind of expensive. And so we're suggesting we put them all together. And so on this plan, you can see we've actually clustered them all together in one space. And the idea here is that we would have access to that one vault, whether it's got 3 doors in it, or whether it's got one door that the clerk holds and maintains, and the other folks come in through that department. that's a planning thing that we can work out. We've done them both ways. But having all of them in the same space, makes more sense, it's a lot more cost effective. I mean, they're designed 6-hour rating, and the way they're designed basically is so that the building can burn down around it and it'll still be there. Now, we're looking at a non-combustible building, but that's the way it's designed. If you were fighting a fire in the building and they were spraying water on it, it would still be protected. So doing something like that inside the building, it's just a lot more cost effective to do in one spot if that works for folks.
Is there, is the space, secured space like that vault space that the school department would typically need for document storage or other storage?
We haven't planned that at this point. It's not in the program. We could certainly do fire-rated storage rooms, and we've done that in the past. You know, it's pretty easy to do a 2-hour or a 3-hour fire-rated room that you can use for storage. And it's not as expensive. It doesn't go up to the kind of level as a 6-hour rated vital record
You don't
vault.
have, the only vault we have at the high school. We don't have anything anywhere else. We have to keep the payroll record, special ed record, and so forth. For a long period of time, so something less than a vault, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, if you have electronic records, you can fit a lot.
Yeah.
Now, a 6-hour rated vault is rated for paper, just so that everybody knows. If you're gonna put electronic storage in there, you buy the little case to put them in. That will also protect them from heat. Because with Fahrenheit 451, whatever it is, the paper's gonna last a good long way. So it might get warm in there, and your electronic might damage it. So you need to buy a little $200 case and stuff like that.
Tom showed the school department's mandated by the state on certain records and what they have to keep, and I've seen what you guys have had to smoke before, so that's a large area. So we can kind of take a look at this to make sure they have adequate space for that.
Sure.
Now, everybody did receive this presentation, they were able to open it, correct?
So this is school administration and some of the shared meeting spaces down along the bottom. You can see here, it's a little hard to see, I guess, but some of the spaces down along the bottom are actually shown a little bit lighter and have a red outline on them. Those are the spaces that showed up originally when we showed you this diagram, and we're talking about taking them out, right? So the red space here, conference room, red space, cable TV, red space. A little hard to see, but, so these are the spaces that we're talking about, probably gonna be double duty. And we don't think that you need, because we have additional meeting space inside some of the offices. Cable TV, we're suggesting being combined with the cable TV space that we have over here, so you can see, when you look at that, compare that to the size of this room, which is 2,200 square feet. We don't have 1,000 square feet of cable TV, that's it. That total space over there is probably maybe the size of this room.
So how would you accommodate something that the town manager said?
Well-
If they were gonna try to do what they're doing in another building, in this building, and it is 6,000 square feet or 15,000 square feet, as you said, that would be a big difference. 15,000 square feet would be, another floor on this building. It's huge.
Right, and their lease space that they have over there, their offices are on the outskirts, they have a large, just common area, which is
Right.
a lot of wasted space.
It is, right?
I
would
mean, if you
agree.
look at their studio and their sound room, it's a little bit more condensed.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could work something, I think.
Yeah, and the room where all the equipment is and everything, yeah. I know that meeting area room is large.
And the room that exists in the high school now, I forget what it's called, the media room.
Large Learning Group, the-
LGI.
LGI. So there's a space, right next door with a viewing window in that, when they have their school committee meetings there, they're able to, cable cast them and so on. Should we be looking at something like that in this setup? If that's the large meeting room, would the expectation, or should the expectation be that there be,
Control room.
a control room, right, you know, adjacent to that space, and maybe there is, and I'm just not seeing it here.
No, you are, that's exactly right. That space that I'm actually shown in red there,
Okay.
is shown right in between, the large meeting room and the selectmen's meeting room. The idea there being that it would be adjacent to one or both of those spaces so that you could do exactly that.
Okay.
I think what we're suggesting, not that that space go away, but it be combined with the other cable TV department spaces, and that one of those spaces, or more than one of those spaces, be adjacent to that, and actually shows in one of the floor plans, I'm sure, I'll point that out.
But we all understand that your IT, your director of IT is not here, and we'll address it at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So
that's
whatever faults and deficiencies we have, we can correct.
And the joints, so there's, it sounds like there's two categories of joint space. There's joint space within the town offices, and then there's town offices and joint space within the school operations, school admin, and then there's joint space between town and school. Is that fair to say?
Yes, now, how, you know, and they all kind of show along the bottom of this slide in terms of meeting spaces. We've kind of assumed that for planning purposes, that the school administration has some meeting rooms, small, medium, and large meeting rooms, and that the town offices has small, medium, and large, meeting spaces. And that the shared spaces would be these larger spaces. And the reason that we separated them out is because your building's gonna be large enough that, if everything was clustered together, everybody would have to do a lot of walking in order to get to these spaces, and so we've labeled these, for town and for school administration, so we can keep these closer to the offices where they're gonna get used the most. And then we're assuming that these larger spaces are gonna be used in the evenings and so forth, and you may wanna secure the rest of the building and have spaces like this open. Now, if you left the rest of the building open and all departments were closed, you could certainly have people go through the building and get to each of these these meeting rooms if you would like. That's a policy decision on how you wanna manage the building. But people could certainly come into the building, walk down the corridor, and come into a room like this, at night, whether it's, and if everything is booked and town needed to borrow a room from the school department, I imagine that's just a coordination issue between the two departments, but, if they would be available.
And that the largest meeting room, how many approximately would that accommodate?
So.
1,300 square feet?
But if it's the largest of the large?
Yeah.
2,300 square feet.
Yeah.
So that sounds like about 200 people to me. Let's see what I wrote. So the large meeting room, I'm planning for 200 people, yes. So there's 200 people in chairs there.
And the board of selectmen?
The board of selectmen, that's the, from here, yeah, that's one down, that's planned for, that hearing room, I'm calling it, that's planned for 80 people.
Thank you.
Now, if you put tables and chairs in there, you're gonna fit less people, but, you know, the place is flexible enough, and then each of those spaces we've allowed for a storage room where you could put tables and chairs, and you could move them out, set them up for tables and chairs, or you could set them up the way we have them shown in both of these cases, with a group similar to the way we have the tables set up here at the front of each of these spaces, and then kind of a gallery of chairs, you know, stacking chairs set up.
So the hearing room selectmen, that was around 80 people that you're saying?
That's right, yep.
And the large hearing room was about 200?
That's right.
And how about the 1,200, well, the school administration conference, it's like what spaces, 1,100 square feet, in the town, 1,290, like how many people get into those spaces?
So the larger of those for both departments is planned for 24 people. And then we have a medium size, which is planned for about 10 people. And then a couple of smaller rooms, which are planned for 6.
Again, these are shared spaces, so if they needed to use the larger meeting or hearing room, they could, for 200 people.
Oh, yeah, if either department had something that had, you know, you were planning on 20 people coming in and all of a sudden it turned to 50, you could go to one of the larger rooms because they're open and available, I imagine. Again, figuring reservation of those spaces is something
Right.
that's a policy decision, but certainly they would be available and shared.
So I just, I guess I'm a little confused here, Phil, if you could just explain a little bit here. So we have this large hearing room that's a shared room, that's 2,300. We have a Board of Selectmen's room here. That would, so you're saying that would be the normal place where the Board of Selectmen would meet for their regular meetings?
They certainly don't have to meet there,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where I would imagine their kind of home base would be.
Their home, that's what I mean, their home base would be there. And then, so then we go over here to school administration conference and support spaces, and those are shared, right? Or is that just strictly school administration?
Again, that's a policy decision between the town administration and the school department. They certainly can be shared. It's really just how you wanna key them and who's gonna be in control of what gets in, who goes into each room.
Okay.
But the way we have it planned is so that each of the different departments could have a meeting in a space like that without necessarily having to call up school department or the school department having to call the town manager's office and say, hey, can we borrow your room? But we think you're gonna use a room like that regularly enough that it makes sense to have two in the building.
I would think that the meeting room that's referenced as, the selectmen's meeting room, would essentially be available for the selectmen when they meet and the school committee when they meet, right? I mean, unless you have a much larger hearing, I mean, sometimes, as we know, we've had large hearings for the Board of Appeals or any number of different things, and that's when we would use the largest space here, but for the regular Board of Selectmen and school committee meetings, they could probably be accommodated in this space that accommodates 80 seats, right?
Yeah, that space, I don't know exactly how big this room is. I counted some tiles while we were
Right.
talking about a little earlier. I'm guessing this is 550, 600 square feet or so. So this is another 50-60% again larger than that room, than this room, the selectmen's hearing room that we have on there. So you could accommodate a group like this, set up with a table similar to this, and probably twice as many chairs. And our friend doing cable television will be able to be in a separate room. And manage equipment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we do
What-
the school
what-
committee here either. I mean, we may leave the school committee at the high school where currently.
Okay, good point.
But this room could, I'm sorry, Tim, but be used for selectmen and even during the day, if you have department meetings, we have.
Right.
I mean, one of the things, we have principal meetings and so forth that we.
You might leave them there today, but 5 years from now, you might not. I mean, I look at what Phil's trying to say here is that the block of, I'll call it the purple block on the left is shared space for, town hall departments. The block is, on the right is shared space for school departments, different groups in schools. But both could be overflow for each other. And then the two larger spaces are,
Right.
reserve room. I mean, you're gonna have enough meeting space where you're not gonna be bumping into each other.
I would say before you make a decision about taking one of these out, I would take a look at the floor plans that we have. Now, we just did some floor plan diagrams, the bubble diagrams basically, but we broke them up into different floors so you could see what it would really mean. I have two schemes to show you that are really just loose, and you don't need to pick one or the other. You can kind of tell me what you like and what you don't about either or both. But in each case, there are 3-story buildings. Now, we could probably do this as a 2-story building, because we've shown that on the test fits, and I've got some test fits for site plans as well that I will show you. 3 stories helps in a couple of different ways, and it would be very nice on the slope site that we have that is the favorite, the recommended from this building committee, so forth, because of the way it could fit into the site, allow more space for parking and so forth, and take advantage of the change in the grade there. So I will show that to you, and when you see it, I think, you may understand the benefit again of having some additional space that's, for each
Phil,
of the-
and
each of the
this is gonna be
departments.
built on slab, correct? No basement?
That's, at this point, there's no basement, that's right.
Correct.
Basement space is expensive, and it doesn't show on here, but you know, if you were talking about a basement space, you basically take all the square footage I've shown you, plus the 35% multiplier, and then add another 25% on top of that, and then you have to pay for that. It's not inexpensive space. So I'm gonna show you the floor plan diagrams, and as we go through them, I will point out a little bit, what we're talking about here. So I'm gonna walk up here. You folks see okay if I go to the front? So, first floor, it's got an entrance that comes in off the front, storage spaces basically across the back, office spaces across the front. Large meeting room, small meeting room, okay? You can close this down right here at night. Still use the front entrance, toilets, exits, both of these large meeting rooms. Storage rooms are available, copier, in case you need to get out, make copies for a meeting you're going to, kitchenette, cable TV room, storage spaces. So you've got a whole suite with toilets that works after hours. The stairs and the elevator that gets you upstairs, that's all closed off at night. The rest of the building is secure. Okay? During the day, that's opened up. You have access to the stairs, the elevators. You've got departments right here. We've got a clerk. There's the vault. We've got the accountant, the treasurer collector, and the assessor. The idea here is we're actually showing a vault with 3 doors in it, an accountant, town clerk, and then another door for the assessor again. Rather than having the kind of traditional, the way we have it here, you walk down the hallway, open the door, step inside the department, and then there's a counter. We actually brought the counters right up to the space. Now there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, but it's nice, it saves space, it allows some flexibility. The other thing that's nice is in a traditional scheme like this, where you walk down the hallway and then there's a door you go through, typically you have a little sign on the door, a little 3-foot thing. This allows it to kind of open that space out into the main space. And also, when you're walking down the hallway, because these counters are open, you can see right through the department and out the windows. So it brings natural light into the center of the building. It's just a little nicer. So that's one of the ideas. We've done it a couple times in some of our town offices. And that's what we're showing here, just so you can see what we're doing. Now the idea here is that we've got offices along the front and kind of mostly storage and closed spaces along the back. The idea there being is trying to make the building so that it makes sense in terms of its layout. So we can do things like keep the ceilings over here and lower, run the ductwork up and down inside the building over here, and really keep these spaces here open and light. Do things like structural reinforcing and so forth across the back. If you were into the hill right here, you wouldn't necessarily need any windows, right? You could bury that. So that's kind of the thinking behind that plan.
I like the open, the open concept of more light focus. I guess also being mindful to some measure of security, given all the situations that unfortunately communities have had to deal with. How does this, does this create too much of a vulnerability, so to speak, if someone that's upset about their taxes and decides to, go crazy?
Yeah. We have, in times where we've done this before, we have certainly done transaction windows over the counters.
Yeah.
In any of the departments, I mean, it's the same issue if you have a door, right? So when
Right.
somebody's come through, you have a counter there that's between you and your customer, your patron. And the question is, are they gonna hop over that counter, or are they gonna do something that they shouldn't be doing?
Right.
And we could certainly put a transaction window there to help with that. And you could do that in any of the departments that you want. You could do all of them that way if you decide you'd like to. The only question we need to figure out is how you're gonna manage your transaction, whether it's gonna be like a bank, that's kind of a hardened glass with a little dip tray to do things, and then how do you make it so that you can communicate with people? Or is it gonna be a little bit more open with a kind of an opening in the glass? that people can write on things, and maybe we've done things where we've staggered the glass off a little bit by an inch or so, and so you can hear around that rather than having a little speaker or something in there, which is a little cold. So there's a variety of different ways we can do that. And then, you know, once we get into that level of it, we can certainly talk about what the options are there.
That's a huge decision, because it will change the entire appearance of the town hall.
Yeah.
Whether you have open or whether you have, you know, some restriction, and when we get to that point, which is a long way away,
Right.
I would suggest we look at all those in real life before you make that decision.
Yeah, we talked about it in Drake when we did their town hall, and they actually, borrowed a small bus from the school department, and the permanent building committee jumped in, and we went on a tour and saw, and we got to the new offices, municipal offices in Derry, New Hampshire. We went in there, everything had glass in front of it, and they didn't like it at all. They all thought, before we went on that trip, they all thought, this is exactly what we should be doing. And then we went on a tour and we saw it, and everybody said, no, I don't like it. It's like the payout window at a casino was the funniest thing.
So one of the things I'd like you to consider too, on the mechanical room, I see that's up on the left-hand corner on the
Yep.
way. Just as long as we have kind of full access, so not in the new building, but when we start to replace equipment, we're able to get things in and out.
Sure, yeah, and you know, and it wouldn't be uncommon for someone to say, can we do a double door going directly outside? from a
Absolutely,
place like
that's what
that?"
I was
So we can-
thinking.
Sure.
And then maintenance closet on each floor, so you could have a custodian.
Yeah, I actually added that to my diagram. There's a maintenance closet on
Okay.
on each of the floors. After you told me that.
I'm hoping you're retired before we have to replace the equipment. Otherwise, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. So, just a question. So, if the storage rooms are in the back there, I'm assuming that whole wall is solid, right? No windows or anything, because that's storage.
Built into the ground.
Yeah, right. So the light that's coming in are gonna be the windows here on the front, right?
Yes, we're actually one
Okay.
floor up now. I'm on the second floor.
You're on the
So
second
you
floor.
could have some windows across the back if this was someplace else on the site and wasn't built into the hill. You may do something a little bit different. I think you probably still wanna have some natural light in those storage rooms. Just not a lot of windows. I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But, I think it makes sense if you have the ability to put the windows there to get a little natural light in.
Mhm.
Somebody's running in and they know there's 2 boxes in there and they know where they are, they just wanna run and grab them. If there's, if the windows are there, then they probably won't have to turn the lights on. They can just go in and grab the stuff and go. So it makes sense to me. And, to be a good neighbor, I don't know if anybody wants to look at a building that's, what is that, 80 feet long or something, doesn't have a
Right.
window across the back of it, that might be a little grim.
Now, do those have to have a special climate control, or is it?
The storage rooms?
Yeah, the storage rooms.
We do need to have air conditioning systems in there, climate control. They don't need to be cooled necessarily, but you wanna dehumidify them and get the air needs to be circulated.
Mhm.
They need to be ventilated for the most part. Small storage rooms, lots of times, they'll let you have a gap under the door, and they'll just vent them, and it draws the air from the hallway or whatever's next door into that space. Larger spaces like this, you can't do it. They're gonna have their own systems.
If you have a historical collection, records that are, really,
Inside the vault.
Inside the vault,
Yeah.
those are gonna be the vault, right?
you have to have special accommodations.
Yeah, I would think so.
Historical. You're not only dehumidifying, you're adding humidity if it's too dry.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a little bit different on those rooms.
And if these layouts, these are applicable to any of the sites under consideration, correct?
You could, at this point, yes, because it's just a bubble diagram.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
you could pretty much put this anywhere, on any of the different sites, and it would make a little bit of difference, whether it's 2 stories versus 3 stories. The footprint gets a little larger at 2 stories. But one of the things that I will point out is that how the plan balances as well on 2 stories is gonna be different than the way it shows in 3 stories. Now, this is the second floor, and so this is the second floor that has additional town offices in it. And so, the first floor, we have the clerk, the collector, and the financial departments and so forth. Upstairs is kind of, where you might come if you were looking to get a permit, right? So you're,
Building and-
building department's up here, the engineering department's up here, and, you know, it makes sense. The open corridors, the open, counters directly to the hallway also make it easy to kind of bob your head back and forth between the departments and get things done. We've also, in one that we did like this, they said they especially like it because somebody will go over to the planning and say, hey, I was just over at the building department, and they told me I could do this. The person from the building inspector department says, I didn't say that, you misunderstood. We're trying to wheel and deal, right?
That doesn't
Having
happen.
Having the open plan here, helps with communication, I guess, is the takeaway. They're a little bit more flexible and user-friendly, both from the person who's coming in to use the space as well as from the employee's point of view is what we've been finding.
Where is the assistant town manager's office?
So right now, everything that's in the town manager's office, that shows up in that diagram, shows up, this is that pale blue box that
Okay.
had everything in it.
Okay,
So we haven't broken everything down
Down.
into these different departments yet. So we've
Okay.
got the manager's office here, large conference room, another conference room, planning, town engineer, health department, recreation, all in here, storage and smaller spaces across the back. This is actually showing entrances in from the rear, assuming that you're gonna come in on the upper floor from the Bazell Senior Center side. Because there's an opportunity to do that in this plan, so that's kind of, this is what we were thinking when we were laying this one out. If you go up one more floor, this is all school administration and storage. And again, offices across the front.
the penthouse for the.
The penthouse, right.
Penthouse for the school administration?
And so I will point out that on the second floor, this large conference room,
3 times the size of the manager's.
Yeah, I noticed that.
No, just on a different spot.
so I'll point on the second floor, this large conference room is in the same spot, roughly.
Right.
And which is great for the town offices and so forth, and then on the first floor, there's those large meeting rooms, and then there's a couple of smaller conference rooms down there. So if town offices wanted to use this conference room, they certainly can, but it means they have to go up the stairs to use it, and vice versa. So that was the idea of keeping these, is kind of labeling them as conference spaces that are associated with this department, because we want to keep them close by. Whereas the shared spaces are on the ground floor, assuming that you're gonna have a lot more of the public coming in and see them, and you're gonna wanna secure the building when that happens.
Can I ask real quick, so just looking at this one, right? The front of the building sort of stretches out noticeably further than what is, I guess, the back of the building.
Yep.
What are these light gray spaces on either side? Is it just like walkways, hallways, like?
That like, oh, that's just the background. Yeah, that's
Like-
outside the
like
building,
up
yep,
here? Okay.
that's outdoors.
Okay.
That's just, I'm sorry, when I'm drawing on my screen, the background in my CAD program doesn't really show up as white, it's kind of beige.
Okay.
So Phil, back on the last slide, the second floor, I noticed there was a couple of entranceways. Was that planning on, like, say, coming from that upper parking lot and?
That's what the idea was, yeah.
A walkway into the second floor of the building?
Yeah. Yep, it also acts as, exit doors, that we need by code. Now,
Means
you
of egress.
could stay in the stair and just make your way all the way down. But the idea there is, if you did build this into the side of the building, you need to think about how you're gonna get people in from that upper floor. If the parking lot is full and you wanna go up above, or depending on what happens in that building, if there's something somebody may wanna park once, go into this building, do their business, walk over to that building and do that thing, it might be better to have access from that side as well. And rather than a little hallway and a door, it could be a little bit more of an entrance if you decided that was something that you wanted to do. That's this is diagrammatic still. So the second one I'm calling Scheme B. This one is a little bit more condensed. The large meeting rooms aren't pulled out of the plan and kind of tucked off to the side. One of the reasons we did that in Scheme A is because it allows us to give a little bit more ceiling height in a large room. So in a plan like this, taking a large room like that, putting it down on the first floor means that you have to increase the floor-to-floor height, or the ceiling in that room gets a little low. So it's a little bit more efficient, but it's one of those questions that we hear all the time. How come the building is got this thing hanging out on the end. When you do a really big room like that, and you put a low ceiling in it, it's a little oppressive. It won't be a nice room, you'll get complaints. It'll be hard to do things in there, like get lighting in there and then be able to film it. You won't really be able to aim the little cameras down over everybody's head, between their heads and the light fixtures, and be able to see anything. So a large room like this, you need a little bit more headroom. And so we'd end up pushing the ceiling height up here. The floor-to-floor height would go up in order to get this to work. It might be a little easier to pull it out and make the building overall a little smaller. But we'll look at it. But that's this building is, this floor plan is more compact, and that's the reason why.
I did notice that the vault also had a single entrance as compared to the other one that had 3 compartments, so you could have one for the school, one for the accountant, one for, say, treasurer, so other.
Yeah, now, whether or not we actually divide the vault inside, or whether you do it the way you do now, that's a policy decision as well. You could
Right.
certainly put some, I mean, you don't need to do much, you can put, you know, simple walls with wire on them if you just need security from one department to the other. Once you're protected inside, it really doesn't need to be anything fancy. Or if you left it open, it's a little bit more flexible as one department grows and the other one shrinks, for example, depending on the type of things they're storing. It's just more flexible. But again, yes, and this one, the vault is on the opposite side. It's got a single door, and basically everybody has to leave their office to go visit the vault. And again, we've got a couple of counters in each of them. Each of the different departments, they're side by side in this one for the most part, which I think makes them kind of convenient. The entrance comes up right in the center of the space. It's that yellow space in the middle. You kind of walk past the toilets and some of those other spaces. You walk by a staircase in the elevator. And then right in front of you is the meeting room. So we could lock down on either side of that large meeting room at night, and you could have that lobby and the toilet spaces available and use that meeting room at night. And again, in this case, you can see we've got the storage spaces, the cable TV, and the little kitchenette for that large meeting room on the left-hand side in kind of darker purple. And then immediately adjacent, this kind of yellow gold color, is the cable TV room, right? And so I think you can see pretty clearly that making those spaces the same would make them adjacent to that space, and that would probably go pretty good.
Is there, probably not a major point, but is there a particular reason why the town clerk office is closest to the entranceway versus accountant?
No, those could swap pretty
Yeah.
easily. Yeah, things like that. Right?
Those 3 offices, accounting, assessing, and treasurer collector, are really kind of all one department, essentially, just different divisions.
Yeah, so things like adjoining doors between those departments, or if you don't actually need a wall between them, that all works out fine when we get into the nitty-gritty and start showing walls. Stuff like that would be helpful to hear as we move these things around. If we go up a floor, we've got kind of a mixed space, again, central lobby space, hallway down the middle, and then we've got planning, health and building, town engineer kind of across from each other on the right-hand side. The large hearing or selectmen's meeting room is moved up onto this floor across from the town manager's office. And we've got the recreation department here and a couple of the office rooms and some storage spaces. So this tries to kind of spread things out in over the different floors a little bit more rather than focus on them. So again, if you wanted to have access to this room at night, you'd have to lock things down in the evening. Now, if you were gonna do that and you had open counters, we've done that in some spaces where they wanna make the building all open, and what we've done is we've done rolling shutters that come down over the counters. And on the upper floor here, this one isn't specifically designed to get built into the hill, which is why I didn't have entrances coming in from the rear on this one, but you could certainly do that. But a lot of the kind of decisions about what went where is just similar, assuming that you want to keep the town office departments closer together in the large meeting rooms downstairs. In both of these schemes, school administration offices ended up on the 3rd floor, or in the penthouse.
Better view.
difference in square footage between scheme A and scheme B?
They're the same.
Even with all that storage, extra storage space I see in scheme A?
The storage space is the same. They both meet the program.
Okay. It just looks like in scheme A, there's like a lot more storage.
Yeah, now I might have blown these up,
Yeah,
because
okay.
this is more compact, I might have stretched it a little bit or something, to get it to fit on the slide a little bit better. Because they're really just bubble diagrams, but the idea there is that they're really the same. It looks more compact because it doesn't stretch out with the medium where it's pulled out separately. So there's pros and cons of both of those different ideas.
I would ask Superintendent Brand if he had any questions. I know you've been sitting kind of quiet over there.
No, I've figured it all in today.
All right.
I'm not asking anybody to make any hard decisions tonight.
No, no. I just wanted to have some input, yeah.
Don't draw it up.
Is storage space potential future expansion also, or?
It is, although because of the mechanical and electrical systems and so forth that go in there, the lighting, probably not as nice.
Okay.
I would say if you were thinking about eliminating one of the conference rooms, for example, I would think about that as a potential future office space, because it's gonna have the AC, it's gonna have the lighting, it's gonna have the power and the data, it's gonna,
Okay.
it's gonna be all set up, it's gonna have the nicer finishes, it's gonna, right, it's gonna have what you need. And so if there was, if everything's perfect and you think there's one too many conference rooms, I think, that is a great expansion space.
Okay.
You could certainly renovate that space at a later
Building
date.
for the future too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you are building.
Right.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
look at
That's
the,
why we're
if
building
you
for
look
it.
at the individuals,
Yeah.
Paul, you'll see that there's an extra space in
Built
most
in.
of the departments.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Anticipating that, 10 years from now, that'll get filled.
Sure.
Yeah, we did try to plan for some growth. That was part of the conversations that we had at each of the departments about what they saw things kind of playing down, and planning for it. And when folks said that they would like to have a space because they have auditors come in for one person. And they could certainly sit in the conference room, especially when you have a couple of them. They could go out in the conference room, but having them in that department made sense, because if that department grows, the auditors could always sit in the conference room and then they'd have that space that turned into another office. A lot of those things I think make sense when you're planning for the future.
And one other thing, Phil, I was just gonna ask you, so regarding like the school administration superintendent suite here, when you say suite, I'm thinking that's where his administrative staff would be and, encompass, so that if you were going to the superintendent's office, and you had a meeting or whatever, part of that would be blocked off, and a waiting area or something there to
Yes.
wait, if you had an appointed time or whatever, and obviously his administrative assistant, you'd get into that deeper as we got into the
Yes.
building.
And so that was when I pointed out that there's these kind of large blocks that are floating in the background that are slightly paler in color.
Mhm.
Stuff here.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm showing on this diagram right
Yeah.
now, is these larger blocks.
Mhm.
But everything that's in that block represents all these separate spaces. And so in that, what I'm calling the suite, that square footage that shows on this plan, all of this stuff fits in there. We haven't laid it out yet, but we will do that. When we get to that point, and there'll be offices and an open space all fit in there, so that when you get in there, it all makes sense.
Now, where this building is gonna be potentially 3 floors or whatever, so the first new people moving into town, coming into the town hall, would there be an area for, say, someone that directs them where it is, or is just gonna be, in most of these town halls that you've built, just have a directory there and they would look and see where they're gonna go? Or do you envision, or what do you see out there of all these town halls that you've built?
Of all the ones that we've done, we had one that had a greeter. And when you walk in the front door, there's a little counter there, stairs next to it, the elevator's on the other side, and there's a little desk right there. And when that is manned, there's somebody sitting there. And it is, in this town, it is somebody that may be working off their back taxes. Apparently that's what they do. They use them as a greeter, and they ask them, and they help people out and then direct them around. That is the only time that anybody has asked us to do that. It's not uncommon to have a little greeter desk at an office building. It's when you think about a corporate office building, and this, so this is that, was that model. That's the only time I've done it. In most cases, we will do things like a directory, and in other cases, we've done electronic directories where you take a flat screen TV and you mount it sideways on the wall and it has the information on it like you do out here.
Right, right.
It could go either way. I can certainly build a space like that in if you'd like. It's not in the program right now, but it's not gonna be a big space.
Good.
Okay. Is that it for the program and adjacencies?
Yeah.
No, that's it?
I scrolled all the way back. I have to go back. I think that was the last slide.
All right, that was a lot of good information. We're missing a couple of voting members tonight, and that Ken Lord from the school IT could be here. I'm not going to recommend any vote on this. This is more informational, I would think, so we can take it all in, everybody can look at it.
Feedback was good. Now, I also have some site stuff that I've done, and if you wanna see that.
That's the next item on our agenda, so we'll be moving right into that.
All right.
If anybody have any questions right now from what they've seen on adjacencies or interior spaces, I know that was a lot. And there'll be more once we get into the building design and as we go. Stand up, please state your name and address.
My name is Virginia Wilson. I live at 48 Brand Ave. When you were talking about having like a concierge or something, it just occurred to me, think of the building down in Boston, the federal building. And I'm sure it wasn't built with the screening devices that you have to go through now. I mean, you've had to go through for 10 years or so. If there were a need, is there to screen people for,
That's
whatever
something
they
we
might be
consider.
carrying on their bodies that's not appropriate? Is there space to do that?
Good question. And something we could take in consideration, that's more like the metal detectors and
Sure.
things you walk through and stuff, so.
We try to make sure that the lobby is large enough that it provides some flexibility, especially if you're gonna use this lobby to support those larger meeting rooms. If you're gonna do a large program and there's gonna be an intermission, half of the people in the room may spill out looking for a bathroom or to go get something to drink, and you wanna have the lobby large enough to be able to support those spaces.
Right.
So, I think the lobby would be large enough to be able to accommodate something like that. If you put that in, depending on what you add, it's gonna grab a little bit of that space. But we need to make sure that we're careful that it's not gonna get in the way of the other things that we're gonna do. Say, for example, in the second plan, probably wouldn't work as well in that we have the entrances to the toilets right there.
But if you had multiple entrances too, like coming in from the back on the second floor, it's understandable.
Yeah,
Right.
yep.
There's no reason why we couldn't run power or data to the floor and cap it. Should
Right.
the need arise, you'd be able to just pop in the machine and go.
Right.
But,
Okay.
That's design development, and that's a little ways down the road. Just
Right.
Put that in
Absolutely.
the can for something to talk about.
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges that, we face here is the balance between providing a inviting environment to residents and people who are looking to do business versus security. Certainly not inviting if you have to go through a metal detector, but then again, we're living in a different age, so.
Right. And to the speaker's point, it could be, as we're going through now, do you have your mask, make sure you have your mask, and any additional information, so.
Temperature sensor.
Yeah, whatever it may be, but that was a good point, thank you. Thank you for the question. All right, Phil, next, test fits?
Test fits. Okay, so we originally had 4 sites. We've eliminated the Whitfield School site, and we're down to 3. The Swain School site is still the one that we are recommending, based on the analysis we did earlier on. And then the follow-up analysis we did, we were asked to reconsider this site. We went back and rechecked the math on that, and we're pretty confident in the way that we scored that. I don't think that we would change anything there. And so, the ranking, as we decided when we did that, kind of live at that meeting, hasn't changed from our point of view, so that's still our recommended site. But, when we went and spoke to the Board of Selectmen, they asked us to take another look at each of the sites and to look at some, a little further at this site and some of the others as well. And so we've done that, and I just wanted to show you what we've done. And so, kind of looking at them again, you can see this overall site plan. This is School Street or the Swain School site. Again, about 6.5 acres, relatively flat, although we know that there's a slope at the rear of the kind of existing parking lot. There's excellent visibility on this site, which is one of the reasons that it ranks so highly. It's right in the center of town, right across from the common, right across from the high school. School administration is right there, so that if they need to get over to the school, they can. It's in a familiar place for folks. It makes a lot of sense from an urban planning point of view to put it here. And actually, after our last meeting, we went back and we looked at, again, at the two different studies that were done. There was a 2001 master plan that was done, and then there was another one done in 2018 by Harriman. Both of those reports both recommended this site for town offices. One for town offices, and then the other for town offices and school administration on this site. And we thought that was worth reiterating. I had forgotten that the first time we were talking about it, and when we made this recommendation, and I was satisfied to see that they basically came up with, and I don't know exactly how they came up with it, but they basically recommended the same site of the ones that they reviewed as we did. So in taking a closer look at this site, you can see in gray there is the plan, which is scheme A that we showed you before. So this would have an entrance that comes in directly in that little notch at the back of the parking lot into the entrance there, and then you can take a right or go up and then into the meeting room spaces, or left or down into the office portion of it, and then take the elevator or the stairs up. And then from the mid-floor, from the second floor, you could get access directly from the parking lot level from the senior center. We could actually develop a little plaza there between those two buildings, if that's something that you wanted to do. But the question there was whether or not we could fit enough parking on site to be able to support this building, as well as the parking that you do there for the schools, and for the other events that you have here. We've kept the 4th of July, it's called 4th of July building, right? Not the Independence Day building, 4th of July building, we've kept.
4th of July building.
Okay, sorry. We also try to keep the green, the way it is right now, and so we've kind of bit into that by, I think, about 3 feet on one side, and then we've actually expanded it on the other side by about the same amount, so it's essentially the same green. We're keeping the large trees in there. And so we've got 315 spaces down at the lower side, and we actually looked at, and this is an option, whether or not it's something that you were interested in doing or not, you could actually expand the parking lot at the Blazell. I don't know exactly what's planned for that building, but when we took a quick look at it, we could see that you could pretty easily add 36 spaces there. You could probably go a little further. But between those 36 spaces down there and 315 we have down below on the right-hand side, you can see that we've got 351 spaces, kind of new spaces that have been added. And when you compare that, you've got 247 spaces there just at the bottom. And so that's 101 spaces, it's a net add. Now, the zoning bylaw requires 140 spaces for the town hall school administration building. We think that's kind of high. That's what's in the zoning bylaw. I don't know that you'll use that many spaces in day to day. But even if 140 spaces was filled, that gives you over 200 spaces available for the schools. 211 spaces is what we have for. So,
I particularly like this layout. My only concern on it, and we'd have to look at it, obviously, when we investigate, where you have those 36 spaces there. We looked at expanding that parking lot at one time before.
Yep.
And there was an issue with water. I don't know how it comes up through ledge. It wasn't a particular holding pond or anything, but there is a waterway that does go down to the lower parking lot.
Yeah.
So that would have to, of course, be addressed
Sure.
during our investigation. But other than that, having a walkway into the second floor of the building, I think that would look pretty sharp.
Yeah. And depending on, again, what happens at the Blazell, it might be nice to have that connection too, depending on what's going on.
Also, what about some green areas in where the parking spaces are?
So So those green areas, and I mean, green areas are great because they provide a place for trees and for landscaping, it gives you a little place to pile the snow. But it also means that you can't, you know, plow this thing from one end to the other at 35 miles an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
Hopefully
highway
you're
department.
not doing 35.
At 3 o'clock in the
CPR
morning,
gets
yeah.
tired.
Would there be site lighting there also in
Yes,
the parking
yeah.
lot area?
And so we're showing green because we think it's nice. Lots of times highway departments don't like it because it's a little, they get a plow around those spaces. But, you know, as George says, you need to have a spot to put your lights anyway. So we have a couple of trees at each one of those things, and probably a parking lot light. And, you know, and again, you're gonna be piling snow someplace. And so to have a spot like that, I think makes sense, give you a little bit of relief. That's if all the snow doesn't get piled up in green. I don't know exactly what they'll do.
And this is, as he said, a test fit, you know, the actual design will change.
Yeah, I'm not a
We have to
civil
go
engineer,
before the
right?
planning board, for site plan review, so, you know, this is just demonstrating that we have more than enough space, to fit the
Yeah.
town hall, keep the green, which was a request of,
Yeah.
the selectmen's meeting, and make sure that there was adequate parking, for students, and make sure there was adequate space for the 4 or 5 events that crowd this on a weekend or week carnival or whatever. And I think we're demonstrating that can easily occur on this site.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have a question, Phil, on this. So, I'm looking here, so the first squiggly line you've got coming down, you've got 98, and then way over by the 36 spaces, you have 108. And I'm looking here at this area. Is that approximately where we really have the hill, the ledge right there?
You can see, this is, what's underneath here is Google aerial map. So if you, this little gray space right here that kind of jumps in, that's the end of your existing parking lot.
Okay,
And these guys, little here, right here, these are those stone steps that kind of run down in the grass.
right,
So that's really where the hill starts, pretty much at that at that topo line. Now, these topo lines are off the GIS map at
Right.
10 feet.
Right.
You know, once we decide if this is your site, get the survey done, and we'll know in a little bit more detail. But for planning purposes and for a test fit, this makes sense. This basically shows us that it's essentially flat across in here. So if we want to extend into these woods, we don't think that we're going to run into too much problem. If we run into water there, I'm not sure exactly what we'll find when we do the survey. But for test fit purposes, it seems like it makes sense to do this. You build this into the side of the hill, this retains the soil kind of coming around, and then the soil will just drop down and follow the natural grade on that side of the building. And it makes sense, so you can come into the upper floor here and to the lower floor on that side.
and the front door would face School Street, is that
The
it?
idea here is the front door is right here.
Oh, the front door is there.
So you come in, and then there's access to the meeting rooms, and then to the office spaces here.
And it looks like, so is that sort of like an extension where the school administration?
These are the meeting rooms. Again, we kept
Oh,
the
the
meeting rooms in
meeting
this
rooms,
thing,
okay.
as you say, so that you could
Yeah.
have a higher ceiling here and you can keep the floor heights down on this side.
Got it, okay. All right, so
It's
that's
just
the
really
front
just one
door.
idea. We may look at something that does that at a future date, whether or not it looks exactly like this or not.
And that provides, just like our high school where we have the event entrance, we're able to isolate the building from, from
Yes.
the event and the rest of the building.
Yes.
Do we have different elevations? The meeting rooms, does the elevation of the building drop off with the meeting rooms,
No.
or do they continue up 3 floors?
No, because the handicap, the access code,
Yep.
it really makes sense to keep things, creating artificial changes in elevation and stuff.
I didn't mean that, I meant like.
Oh, like a sloped floor or
No,
something?
like, is the first story bigger than the second or third story?
Yes, in this case, in
Okay.
scheme A, yes,
Okay.
that's right. The upper floors in this
Okay.
scheme kind of are from here over.
Gotcha.
So the big conference rooms will be
Yep.
a story and a half.
Yep.
And then you'll have the 3
Perfect.
stories with all the office spaces.
Okay.
Giant superintendent suite.
So the next one we took a look at, because we've been talking about this site as, one of the benefits of this site, one of the large benefits is that kind of urban planning, aspect of it. And so we wanted to take a look at what it would mean if we were to take the building and pull it out towards the street. From an urban planning point of view, when you're driving around in the center of town,
This is second.
it adds to that visibility. The site has great visibility, and so would it make sense if we could pull that site up there, still maintain the green, have access directly on the common, you know, have that connection to the center, as well, and, we just wanted to see if that would work. We've kept the 4th of July building there, the Bozell stays where it is. We, again, dropped those 36 additional spaces in up above. We actually, extended the parking lots a little bit over on the right, on the upper, on the upper left there. And you can see we're actually showing 328 spaces down below and an additional 36 up at the old senior center. It gives us a total of 364 spaces, or a net add of 118. So that if you were using, again, all 140 spaces required by the zoning bylaw for the town offices, you'd have 224 spaces available for school parking. Again, that's a lot of parking spaces. And it really, again, we're not suggesting that's how many you need, but we wanted to take a look at, because one of the questions was, is this one really gonna support what we need to do? So this is, this shows a 3-story building. That's that compact footprint. It's one of the reasons we looked at that compact footprint design here. It's a 3-story building. It fits in a small spot. We're able to keep the green, get some parking immediately in front of the building, and then plenty of other parking around it. The green stays the same side. We've still got some trees and spots for lights inside the parking lot and so forth. And the other thing is that the Bozell stays kind of out there by itself and doesn't have another building in front of it. That connection between those two buildings goes away in this scheme, but again, we have a great connection to the common in Middlesex Avenue.
If you did Plan A in that site where it is now, how many parking spaces would you lose?
If we use scheme A there,
Yeah.
We don't lose any, we increase, actually.
it would depend on, scheme A is a little bit more spread out.
Right.
Right?
So
And
how many parking spaces? would you
I don't know that offhand without doing a test fit, but
Go back to the other slide.
it could be,
One more.
yeah, this seems a little slow.
Yeah.
So if you were to take that and put it up in the front there,
Mhm.
you might lose another 20
The
spaces.
other one said 117 net added, now we're at 104 net added. So yeah, we're talking about 13 parking spots.
Well, I'm a little concerned about, the dog leg on the left here.
Yeah.
I mean, you're starting to get into hill there.
You're into the grade there,
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, you're talking retaining walls
Yes, that's true.
The other thing,
and
if
things
you,
of that nature. I don't know how people can be jumping up and down to a concrete retaining wall in town lane.
if you go back to the other side, just point something out. Let's start one more time back to the other one. So, if you, the next one, I think, shows where the high school sits back far enough off the street.
Yeah, there is a green in front of that building.
See the green in front of the high school?
Yep.
Then you have your common area, then you have the swing green in the parking area, and you don't have that building right on top of the common. So it just gives you the perception of a larger area.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I guess one of the perhaps downsides, so to speak, of that arrangement where the parking is just so prominent, is that you've got such a beautiful green space, you've got the little area where they have the farmer's market, and then this vast sea of pavement. You know, it seems, and it becomes a subjective issue to some measure in terms of what people like to see, but it seems to be one of the virtues of having the building more closely aligned to Middlesex is that you're buffering some of that vast sea of pavement. The other thing, I don't know how folks, in this version, for example, the abutters across the street on School Street, how they're gonna perceive a 3-story building right across the street, whereas if you have the building, in Plan B, there's enough of a space, you've got the green space that creates a bit of a,
Buffer.
gap or a buffer between the residents right at the corner of School and Middlesex and the building itself, you know?
But if you
Yeah.
reverse the building, flopped it 180 degrees, you know,
Which-
1.5 story,
At this plan here?
yeah, on that plan, your 1.5 story
I'm gonna go.
conference room space would be adjacent to the houses, not the 3 stories, you know what I'm saying?
If we put that, remember when the swing was there?
Yeah.
The people on
Yeah.
School
Dan's suggesting
Street,
we
that's
actually
all
copy
you
this.
can see.
Take this plan.
It was a-
Cause you
it
don't
was a
wanna
brick
have
building.
them
Flip it like
at
that.
night,
Yeah.
going into the houses.
Right.
We have these lower sections would be over in here, not as close to the street,
Yeah.
and the taller section would move back.
Right, if you flopped it 180.
Yeah.
So
That
you're
would be
saying
more
that
building
more,
design.
more of
Yeah.
the green would be closer.
But I mean, I think you can step it back so it's not as intrusive, it's still gonna be a
Lowest spot would be
change.
here, closer to the
You know,
neighbors.
people that are living on the street, this is gonna be a big change.
That
Preserve the
is.
view
Well,
that we
I
have
was just
from the
saying to
common up to
Diane,
the senior center.
when the
It's one of the
swing
sites
was
we
there
have,
and
you
it
know.
came down, one of the residents there, one of the biggest things was, and he was thankful that he had a view now of the common, and he got to see the school, and right down the street. Which you put that 3-story building back there, that's gonna eliminate all that.
But, the other thing is, yeah, on the other side of that argument, though, I think what Jeff is saying is from the perspective of you know, some of the comments, that, we started out with here for this site, you know, let me just get this piece of paper here, you know, visibility. I mean, you know, we're erecting a new building here and being on Middlesex Ave and creating a town center, which is what we want to do. I think we have to be concerned with visibility, and I think just looking at all paving, you know, especially when the kids leave and, you know, those spaces are all empty there, you see just a lot of pavement there. Whereas, but I understand what you're saying, George, but I just think that the town hall being the most prominent building in town, I mean, we probably could move that back a little to have a little bit of green.
I think our designers would be able to do at least some lot design that would look nice.
Yeah.
with landscape
But
and stuff.
I think we're getting into the nitty-gritty.
Right.
Right,
So,
right.
That's a design.
the task that the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen was that the problem they had with this site was we couldn't get enough parking. We were gonna take away the green. We were gonna, you know, there was question after question after question after question. And I think what we're demonstrating is that it can be done. What the final configuration is, where the final location of the building is, you know, we'll get to that. But this site is certainly large enough to accommodate the school use, the town hall use, the green, and the annual events use. And I think Phil's hit a home run ball in demonstrating that.
And that's keeping the Bazell in place.
And that's keeping the Bazell in place.
Yeah, not having to, right.
All right.
We also took another look at this site. This site's larger, 19 acres, again, relatively flat. The visibility here is limited, just where your current town hall is, obviously. Phasing and interruptions are required during construction. If we aren't gonna get into those fields, and we also looked at an option for getting into those fields, if we aren't gonna get into those fields, then basically, you can see here, we're showing a 2-story building there in gray and a parking lot that's 140 that we need for this building, plus some additional spaces to support the play fields, assuming that you're gonna have meetings, in the evening, and you're gonna still have something going on at the play fields and so forth. I don't know how many spaces there are, but on each of these, we've taken a shot at kind of a guesstimate. And we didn't wanna go over the top, but we wanted to let you know what we thought would fit comfortably on here. There's recreational uses on site, it's adjacent to residential, and it's away from the town center. This is really ends up being a summary of the kind of things that showed up in the matrix, which basically recommended against this site. But basically, in order to do this, you can see in the bottom right-hand side, it says phase one. We need to phase this in order to do it effectively. If we're gonna build a town hall here, again, that's a 2-story footprint. We're gonna build, basically, a portion of the parking now. And this may end up being one of those things where it's a means and methods issue or question when it comes down to it with the builder. You know, they may say, well, you know, you got a bunch of existing parking lot, we're gonna keep as much of that as we can as possible, and we're gonna phase it so that we do X, Y, Z. Exactly how it works out, we don't really know. But what we're showing here is that basically, you're gonna end up getting your circulation path in there, and some of the parking, your existing town hall is gonna be there, it's gonna be operating on a kind of day-to-day basis while they build this new building. People are gonna have to come in and use the play fields and so forth, so it's gonna be a security issue. It's gonna add a little time to the project, it's gonna add a little cost. Those are all things that we can work out, I'm sure. You can see the existing town hall, and then this little concession stand there, that's that other kind of brick red box that shows there. The pickleball there is, we try to preserve that as well. And again, this is a 2-phase project. In phase 2, you can see we take down the town hall, you've moved into the new building, and then they can build out the rest of the parking lot. And so you're working in your new building, construction still goes on for a couple of months while they wrap it up. They take down the rest of the town hall, and they probably put a little green space there in whatever's left over. And then once they're all done, they can open the whole thing up, and then you have your space. Now, in this case, we're showing parking of 212 spaces. You need 140 for the building. That's just the way it shook out. We don't know the exact number that you need for the play fields. It isn't part of kind of what we were doing, but if we were to pursue this, we'd have to be a little bit more careful about how many spaces those are. So we've got, it's 140 plus, 60, 72 additional spaces that we have to support the fields. There's probably more there if you need more.
70 spaces here now.
No, you don't, no.
We have maybe 60 here.
Right, so I mean, he's demonstrating that your current use of the fields will fit with the town hall at 212 spaces.
So again, I don't know exactly what it is. The building that we're building is twice as big as this one, and then some. So the parking requirements presumably would be a little bit more. But anyway, there's room for this amount of parking and then some if we really needed to go further. So I think that a site plan like this would work. Again, it's not a great site for a variety of reasons. In order to do this, you're gonna have taken down a lot of this kind of pine forest that people walk through right now. That all goes away. There's walking paths in along right where that town hall, school administration building is shown. There's walking paths through there. All those woods come out. Those walking paths go away. So we could accommodate it, but it's just not.
There's a brook that runs along back there. Is that within the 100-foot buffer where the town hall would be?
Well, the brook would be at
You can see the brook back there.
200-foot
Oh, okay.
inner repair,
Yeah.
100-foot inner riparian, 100-foot outer riparian.
Yeah.
So it's hard to see, I know, but there is, the brook is there.
Yeah.
Lover's Brook, right? We've got a 200-foot setback, which is this green line right here. And then we have a 100-foot setback from the edge of the wetlands. Again, this is from the GIS, and
Right.
survey may change this, but then there's a 100-foot setback, which comes on this site. We're away from 200 and the 100-foot setback from the wetlands, with all the development we're doing. So we try to be conscious of that when we lay this thing out. We didn't take it all. But again, we're pretty close to the edge of the property in order to be able to get this to fit.
Yeah.
There's a buffer
Certainly.
there, I don't know if these neighbors are gonna mind one way or the other. It won't make a big difference to them. I don't think they'd be able to see it.
And that's a two-story, you said?
This is a 2-story building. That's what that footprint shows. A 3-story building would be a little smaller
Yeah.
and taller.
It's pretty similar to what Dietz had come up with. Not only, for those of you that were not on the other committee, not only with the parking phasing, but with the building location and size.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about taking down those pine trees and that old pine grove area. You said that's all gonna go away. Yes.
In order to do this.
Yeah.
Well, it's that or something else has to come out.
Yep.
And,
And that, the building, I guess, could not, not to get focused on this, I suppose. So I guess it demonstrates that certainly you could put the town school admin building there and have more than enough parking space and actually perhaps enhance the parking availability for the various activities that go on down on those fields. The town hall, certainly the town school admin building loses its prominence, so to speak, because it isn't really kind of tucked away to one side of the parking basically, but.
So the second thing we looked at was a request from the Board of Selectmen to take a look at the possibility of putting both buildings on site here. And so this does require taking the fields.
And this too is almost identical to what Deeds had come up with. I mean, yeah, I'd claim collusion if I could. It's literally, it's strikingly familiar for me. But the site lends it to that. They had a lot more parking over by the property line.
You could certainly, you could certainly do that. We were trying to stay away from pickleball and in the woods on one side. If we were gonna kinda dig into the woods on the other side, we tried not to just do it to the whole site, which is why we did the way we did. There's different ways to do this, obviously. I don't think that you'll get both of those buildings in there and all the parking you need without getting into those ball fields. But I don't know how much parking, again, you need for the ball fields. I don't know how much parking the senior center requires. So we put 300 spaces in there, assuming that there was gonna be something for town hall school administration, something for the senior center, and something for the ball fields. But that's what that shows, to give you an idea about the kind of footprint that it takes up. And again, we'd have to phase this too, so obviously it's similar. You wouldn't be able to do all the parking, you'd have to build it and move in.
Those spaces to the very far left that are kind of separate and distinct.
Yep.
I guess the reason they're out there is because they're located there as part of the phasing.
Yes, and it could be that could just be a driveway, and you end up having a smaller parking lot to begin with, and then more parking later on. It's one of those things that if you really did choose this site and you wanted to go a little further there, then we talk about really how many parking spaces you needed, what you really need to live with, how many parking spaces us and our civil engineers think that you could really salvage from what you have existing to support the building that you're in. This is really just a test fit. So.
You're right. Once that town hall, once the town hall goes away, that gap between those spaces on the far left and where the parking starts could essentially be additional parking, I guess, if you wanted.
Yeah, if you needed more spaces, you could certainly do that. I've labeled it as a green space.
Right.
So with the idea there being, you come into the site and you look across a green space that you could use for
I guess
more municipal functions rather than the play fields.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily need to make it all parking, I suppose. But okay.
But if we did compress that, you could pull the senior center out of the ball field a little bit more. Sure.
I think the other version that we saw from Dietz, didn't it have the senior center or the town hall up kind of
In the
parallel,
corner.
right, kind of across from
Where the-
where the town hall is now?
Yeah, they had,
Yeah.
I think where the building was, the building is there.
Still had to sacrifice a field, those fields.
Right.
Right, but I
They had
think,
parking where it says potential senior center.
yeah,
Yes.
yes. And then they had the senior center more
In line.
in line with the town hall,
Right.
right?
In one.
In one
version,
option.
In one option.
One option, right. In one option, right.
Yeah, this one loses that forest, it loses the playground,
Yeah.
or chunks of it.
Not a big
concession
fan.
stand.
Yeah.
It wasn't well received.
No,
No, it's still not.
it's still not.
Let's be clear, we lose 2 ball fields.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the selectmen made the motion to eliminate the double use option for the senior center building.
Right, right. Maybe we should do the same tonight.
You're not gonna be in the ball fields.
Yeah.
That's true, that's sure.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a good point.
Keep
So
going.
John is suggesting, again,
You move it over into that little point down on the bottom left.
Yeah.
You might
Right,
be able to
which-
fit it in over there. The red is the setback lines, so you might be able to squeeze
that's
it in there.
where the little headway is that connects to Garden
Right.
Ave on the opposite side of that 300.
Is that, you're talking about putting the building there?
Yeah.
So we had an option of that on the senior center building committee.
Right.
And it was not well received because of how close, when you pull back, it's really close to the neighborhood.
Okay.
So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you would be right at.
You'd be right on top of those
Yeah.
houses.
Okay. Yeah, that's the problem.
That was, so we kinda,
Can you move some
we're
of
trying to
the-
be, good neighbors.
Wipe out the pickleball court too.
Right. You'd be able to put some.
Do
back,
not.
But you're gonna take out most.
Wipe out the pickleball.
Wipe out the pickleball court.
No, Diane will have none
Only
of
when
that.
Diane has her,
Be still, man.
match.
The other thing we looked at is, this property, from the select board's point of view, is still on the table. We looked at what that would mean. This again is a two-story building, 140 parking spaces. Nothing else, on this site. We'll set it back from the street a little bit, so that you have a little green space in front of the building. There's an entrance in and an exit out. They can both be two-way if that's what you wanted to do. So it looks like it would support the building, and it looks like there's enough green space there that we could do things like regrade it in order to get the parking lot and everything in. We'd have to take some of those woods down and so forth in order to do things like stormwater management and just get the thing built. So it wouldn't look all green around the way it goes right now. We take down a lot of those trees. So it would fit. There's not a lot of room here for growth, and this, I drove by this site on the way in. This whole neighborhood's kind of dark and quiet. Doesn't really lend itself from an urban planning point of view for a building like this. This would be by far the largest building in the neighborhood. You can see
Yeah.
St. Dorothy's has got that distinction now, and we're more than twice as big as that building. This would be a big building in that small neighborhood, and it'd be out here by itself. So,
Yeah.
is it doable? Sure, you could fit it on there, just not a great site for a building like this, I think, given the.
Not a good use of
the
space
traffic in
either.
there.
Yeah.
I know every time I try to
No,
pull in and
it's-
out.
this is all wasted,
It's all wasted, right.
It's a little tricky getting in and out, but,
Would that be a two-story or a three-story?
that is showing a two-story.
This is a two-story.
Yeah. That footprint there is showing us a two-story.
So if you did a three-story,
It would get a little, it would
be
get
a little bit
smaller.
smaller, a lot taller.
But a lot taller, okay. So the only time that we're looking at a three-story then is at the Swain Green.
That is a decision we still have to make. I mentioned, for example, from a planning point of view, it kind of makes sense to have town offices on 2 floors and school administration on a third.
Third.
And if we have a 2-story building, you're gonna have school administration and town offices on the same floor somewhere in the building. I don't think that's the end of the world, it's just it's in a kind of a,
Right. In the high school, 3 stories with the mansard on top.
Yeah, with the mansard roof,
and
right?
you could do 2.5, the 2 lower floors could be a little bit larger and the upper floor could be a little smaller.
But the proportions of the high school make it.
Right.
Should we be considering in terms of whichever site, the prospect that in, I don't know, 30 years or whatever, there's a need to expand the footprint of the building and which site would be most conducive to some kind of expansion? I mean, each of these, in terms of the design that you've put together, you've included some measure of expansion for an additional office here and there, which is certainly gonna be helpful. I guess if there's a need at some future point to do something more significant, is that something we should be thinking about now?
It depends on how real you think that is. Kind of both of these plans that we showed you down here are kind of a traditional double-loaded corridor. Corridor down the middle, offices or storage space on either side. And the easiest way to expand that is to just extend the corridor and build more space on either side of the corridor.
Yeah.
In this case, that wouldn't work great here because we've got it running kind of left to right as the street goes, or top to bottom in this plan. So adding to the bottom of the top would be.
Was that Swain and built into the hill, could you go back on top of the hill?
You could, although I think again, extending along the hill may be easier to do from a planning point of view at a later date.
Okay.
And if you were gonna do that here, you may wanna think about turning the building 90 degrees, so that you could extend to the back. So you take some of the parking
I
spaces.
personally think realistically, I mean, Wilmington's almost built out
Right.
from an urban standpoint. I mean, obviously you're gonna grow, but it's
Right.
almost built out. And your school population's gonna ebb and flow. It's not gonna be like the seventies where you had the big giant push. So I don't know that you're gonna ever add on to this building
I would
in a long-term scenario, unless Beacon Hill does a lot of unfunded mandates and adds a whole bunch of departments that every town's gonna have to do.
Right.
Right.
But I would think.
Which is possible.
I think with the improvements in electronic document storage, with all the storage space you have in here, you may be able to take advantage of some of that storage space you have as the physical space you need for those documents goes down over time. You may be able to expand into some of you get a fair amount of storage in this building.
Right, I think that, it seems like one of the issues, ultimately the records laws and storage requirements need to catch up with technology, because a lot of times we're required to store paper records, even though from a technology standpoint, we could easily, put them in a form, technology form.
I mean, you know what the public records ledger looks like. I mean, it's all over the place. Some records are 7 years, some are 3, some
Right.
are forever. I mean, it's depending on the record. I mean, it's like 900 laws.
But,
And when you go to destroy them, it's even worse.
Right, but then again, I mean, one of the things that, I've also considered is when you think about the various forms of technology, so to speak, that we've seen over the years, we went from paper to microfiche. Now, it's very we've got a microfiche reader, I guess, but it's challenging to see that stuff. Then you had the little floppy disk. Nobody has floppy disk. You can't even get a unit that reads those anymore. So there's nothing to say the technology that you store records on today is going to even be readable 50 years from now.
That is true. We all thought the floppy was going to be the end all be all.
Huge, 1.4 megabytes.
Oh yeah, huge. Little red light would go on and blink. Oh.
So I guess, then I would just ask the question, do we all feel comfortable that we've kind of covered all the questions that the Board of Selectmen have asked of the architect? I mean, the options?
Have we done our due diligence?
Have we done our due
I
diligence?
believe we have. We've gone-
The only issue that was not covered by, was site visits and, to the sites. But you're all familiar with the sites, you live in town, so it wasn't an urgent thing that anyone seemed to be wanting to do, but, I mean, that's always still on the table if it needs to be, but, I mean, I think we've answered all of their questions, or at least provided data for them to ponder the questions. They may have a different opinion, or they may not, but I certainly think that, I think we've done a far better job than we did when we went into the joint meeting.
So I guess then my only question is, well, we have missing members tonight, so we're probably not gonna take a vote. But, if, at the next meeting, if, I presume then, is he gonna have to go through all this again for?
Well, I would suggest, I mean, we've all seen this, everybody's seen the presentation, it's been passed out, so it's the same one, it was good to have it here tonight, for everyone could see it. We will have a couple of questions from our two absent members, and I think at that time we would take a vote. Not to go out of order here, but I would think that if we could meet, say, January 5th, see everybody's availability. At 6 o'clock.
Just for the purposes of voting?
Just for the purposes of voting, Phil, I would have the presentation available, so if there's any questions.
Again, unless there's anything that you think you need me to fix.
I really think you nailed it here. I think you've done pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it may be worth just going through a very brief.
But it also has, Ken Lord will also be here at
I don't
that.
have to do what I did tonight.
No.
No.
No, but I would think between now and the 5th, it would be also appropriate for Phil to talk to Ken. And maybe understand where he's going.
Yeah, between,
That's a big program change to add, 5,000-6,000 square feet. That's
yeah,
it's gonna be
$500 or $600 a foot. That's a lot of money for a TV studio.
we'll be talking to that and our IT for John O'Neill, so I think
Could we
that's-
give them the Bazell School?
Well,
Well, it would be kind of talk about going full circle, so they started over at the Swain.
Right, right, yeah,
Oh, we got this building.
yeah, yeah. But I mean,
You
it's,
also have this building too.
yeah.
Yeah, you also
Yeah.
have this building.
So,
What would be the renovation cost though for the Brazil?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What would be the renovation cost though in the Brazil area?
I'm not throwing numbers.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
doing it.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
Not
not,
falling into that trap.
yeah, yeah.
They do have
Well-
income from the
Yeah.
cable contracts.
Well, the cable's still
So-
funded.
Right.
We'll grab
Yeah,
that.
they would, yeah, so,
Pay access.
All right, so again, everybody's availability on the 5th?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Great. Perfect.
I'll be zoomed, but I'll be good.
All
We're
right.
good. Excellent.
6 o'clock we talked about?
6 o'clock,
Yeah,
You think you'd be in this building?
right here.
9.
yeah.
Same that time.
Let me ask Town Manager, is there any benefit to having, any of the other members that, if Phil's gonna come out here to meet with WCTV, could he also meet with the other member that isn't here the day he comes out here and kind of,
Bring 'em up to speed.
bring him up to speed?
Oh, with members who weren't here tonight?
Right, right.
Yeah, I guess it depends upon schedules, certainly that would be helpful.
I mean, especially if he has to come out here and see what they've got for a building there, and, on Waltham Street.
Might be able to do it over the phone.
Right, I don't think that he's coming out here just for a special
Yeah,
trip for
and
that.
I envision that,
That'll be a
we're
discussion.
gonna find out from Ken whether he's truly needs to move,
Right,
and that's a huge policy change. I mean, if he doesn't need to move, but needs technological access, are we doing a good job of providing it for
Yeah.
both school admin and for town hall? I think that needs to be answered, and only he can answer, he can really answer that.
Right. But I'll tell you, I've heard a lot about the building, but I was blown away when I went there and saw what they had. And in my personal opinion, it would be worth it for you to go and see what they have. I know it would, be extra time and everything, but,
I don't have any problem going.
but,
The question for you all is, if he has 6, 8, 10, 15,000 square feet, whether or not you are gonna build that new in this building.
well, and that's what I think you have to, explain to him and what his expectations are. Because I agree with what George just said. When you walk in there, there is a lot of open space that really isn't necessary, and, the office space. What I saw that was really necessary was the studio itself, where they actually do the filming, because they have different backgrounds that they're sliding.
I'll have that candid discussion with Ken, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an
I'll
important
have-
conversation.
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
need to have, how much
Candid.
additional space we need
You
to
got
put
that,
in,
see what I did there?
Yes. 100 square feet is all you get.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Joe.
So, anyway, okay, well,
Okay.
I guess that answered that question. If he's gonna come out here, maybe he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, that's all.
All right, next item on the agenda, our OPM, we'll discuss the public outreach. In front of you guys is newsletter.
No, this is the one that I sent ahead of time.
Okay. Oh, all right, gotcha. Okay. So, with this committee a little further behind in the senior center committee, we're up to 5 newsletters, and we developed a pretty good system on doing the newsletters. We'll do a newsletter, after every meeting, we're gonna post them. We've, got our editor-in-chief, Diane, who's volunteered to edit them.
Awesome.
Let me check.
I would say, one here, reading through volume 1, and I could be wrong,
Uh-oh.
but, I believe that this building was built for 400,000, back in the time, not 800,000.
It does say though, it was built for a little bit more than half of that, I think, someplace in there. The
So-
scope of design decided on
So
12.
the town meeting voted
Voted
800,000.
to
It didn't
build.
say-
It voted, yeah,
Yeah, then the 12 room elementary.
and then at
was
more than half the cost of
Right.
the original. So it was so they appropriated 800,000, and they only really paid about 400,000
correct.
for the building.
Which would never happen these days, but
No, not,
Did that go
not-
right
not
into the
since
general
lumber
fund?
and everything else is going up, right?
So anyway, let's get into the semantics about how you guys spent your money back in 1957. I wasn't born
I wasn't
yet.
here yet.
Lucky you.
George and I are gonna start doing, our local access TV updates. We have on the senior center provided a link to every, one of these televisions from your local access TV. We have all the newsletters posted. We don't have any of yours posted yet, cause you guys haven't seen them, but, we try to do them in one page, and not too long. Sometimes we lose sight when it gets too long. They'll have the presentation to look at. If it needs to be longer, we'll do a 2-pager, but people won't read past 1 page. They
Right.
don't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So,
And you go right to the town website.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
hit the projects, you'll see them there, and then you can right to.
right, so, and George is throwing them up on your town website too.
Yeah.
So I guess you have that,
We
your,
have problems
school-
with that? With the town website, getting it on the town website?
No,
No?
no, you have problems with town getting on our website.
Yeah, P3s,
Yeah.
but we're fine.
Oh,
Your website's fine.
okay.
So-
So is it there yet?
John O'Neill was putting it on, so I don't know if he had them completed them, I know he was doing them all.
I checked the other day, I didn't see
Probably
any.
not. I think the intent was to try to make sure everybody saw these tonight before it went out.
Oh, I see, okay,
Okay.
all right.
So, that's basically what we're gonna be doing on that. We'll decide as we get further along when you wanna do mailings through water bills and things of that nature. We can meet, with schools, whenever the schools wanna meet, public outreach. We just don't have enough content to be doing too much outreach right now. So, I mean, we have enough to let everyone know that we're marching down the path. I think that, this will be just like the senior center committee. You're gonna have a ton of information in a short order, especially if we start meeting every other week. And that the resident that wants to follow along is gonna have the ability to follow along, which has been our goal. And the resident that doesn't know how to get in and follow along, certainly can see it on TV or, local updates and things of that nature. I think that complies with what the Board of Selectmen were trying to get across at their meeting. And that was the last linchpin of that meeting, was that we weren't doing enough public outreach. So, we're now up to 7 newsletters, 2 for this one and 5 for the other one. And, tomorrow we'll write number 3 based on this meeting. And, letting them know that we're gonna vote on, a second vote on the recommendation on the 5th.
So I think one of the other things about the outreach is and I think probably with the Board of Selectmen, more importantly, is that if you can establish some sort of timetable for them, like when you would have, say, of course, we have the newsletters that they're gonna go on the websites. As far as public outreach to the people, you know, when would you be ready to have, say, a public forum, the first public forum? At what, because people don't understand at what point in design that you're ready to do something like that,
So,
you know?
It would be my recommendation, of course, you would bless it. It would be your decision. But it would be my recommendation that after we have a basic floor plan and a basic elevation, that we have a discussion on a public outreach session. I don't believe that we need to do public outreach on site selection, but maybe you do. I mean, there was such a shift in back and forth over the site selections on getting the process done. You know, maybe we have to do a public outreach on just the site selections. But we've had quite a few residents come to the meetings, at least on the other committee, with opinions and speaking at the meetings. I don't think that we're operating in a vacuum here. But after the plans are done and the rough elevations, and the plans will be by no means finalized, I think you have to go on the road, and I think you have to, hit the library and hit the senior center and hit the schools, whether it's a PTA night or a parent night or whatever the venue that you would say is good for your town. There has to be public presentations to that effect. And I know Phil and I have done them everywhere we've done projects. It's not something foreign to us, but each town's a little different on when to do it. But I wouldn't do it until you had the plans and the elevations ready and people can start to visualize what we're talking about. You all can do it because you're permanent building committee members. You're living and breathing this. If we threw up some of the sketches and asked people to comment on it, they wouldn't be able to dive into it. And I think that was abundantly clear when we met with the selectmen. We needed to have a little more meat on the bone and to be a little bit clearer. And I don't think we're there yet on either project to do that with public outreach, other than keeping everyone up to date.
But it is important.
Oh, it's 100%. We have to do it.
So there's no confusion, because, I mean, the permanent building committee, we are aware of what's going
Right.
on. But there is a senior center, there is a town hall, and there's a MSBA for a school.
Right.
And then we have town meetings coming up, so, and people don't quite understand, what's being represented, so.
The other thing that is, I think, critically important that we do even before we start getting into looking at designs and all is continuing to make the case and really pushing this to the public as to why. Why do we need a town hall school administration building? You know, people understandably recognize that there's been talk about a new Wildwood school, a new senior center. Now these buildings, there's talk floating around about an ice rink, talk about a fire substation. How are we gonna pay for these things, and why is a town school admin building so important? So, one of the things I think that needs to be done sooner rather than later is similar to what George, you did at the Wildwood, is to have go on a walking tour of this building. You can pick your host, but do the same thing at the Roman House and explain, some of the structural issues, and then the host can talk about the programmatic and logistical issues of working in these spaces that were really beyond their life.
But did you do, and, clarify this for me, did you do that prior to seeking your first appropriation?
Yeah, we went through it all just so we could submit it as a.
Right. So, this has been voted, so the voters know that this is being studied. I
But it's
think-
good information, though,
No, don't,
The vision.
I'm not discounting what you're saying. When we get time to present, and we start doing our presentations, we have to have a segment on the existing conditions. That's an absolute have to. I mean, just walking through the Roman house is gonna be enough, never mind this building. Neither one of them are conducive to, you know.
Well, we know that, but the problem that I see is that the town school admin does not have a built-in constituency. With all
Right.
due respect to the senior center, and there, you know, there's no question that we need a senior center, but there is a constituency there that is focused on a new senior center. And there's certainly a broader audience out there that needs to be convinced, but, there is no town school admin constituency. So in the absence of that, you know, it becomes even more important in my estimation to really convey what the shortcomings of the buildings are and why now. So,
I would
you know,
agree.
If you think that that's something that we can do a focus on, I'll be happy to start working on that now.
Yeah.
I just don't know, I just can't imagine grabbing people to come out to an event just to show them existing conditions without showing where you're going.
Dan, I think you
What am
kind
I
of
missing?
no, I think you're missing the point. I get what the town manager is saying. You know, when the seniors approached the selectmen, they came up with a PowerPoint presentation that they did of the building, the deficiencies, the programs they couldn't have, the space needs that they needed and everything. And I think there's so much confusion now with a special town meeting that's coming up in March.
right.
And then there's talk, well, there isn't talk, but then there will be the annual town meeting, which will come up in May, beginning of May. And then there is going to be, in the fall, another special town meeting for these buildings. So just that sequencing of events, first of all, explaining to people in March has nothing to do with the town hall / school administration building or the senior center. You know, that has to be perfectly clear to a lot of people, because some people think that they're going to that meeting, even though the town manager's made it perfectly clear at one of the meetings that that was the only article, as far as he knew at the present time, that was gonna be on it. So, you know, things like that have to be cleared, but visuals play a big role in helping to people understand what the needs are. And justifying what can't be done here in this building, because maybe personnel are scattered around, and as the town manager said, there's a lot of improvements that have to be made with heating, electrical, and so on and so forth. We're on borrowed time. I think the same thing with the Roman house not having accessibility for disability. I think some sort of PowerPoint with quick pictures and highlighting those deficiencies, and people have to actually see them in black and white. They really have to do that.
I'm in full agreement with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'm not trying to push back on you guys. What I'm saying is that needed to be done to get the appropriation for the study we're doing.
Right.
Somebody got that accomplished, and whether it was the 2018 study, probably.
Our facility master plan.
Facility
did a lot of
master
that,
plan
outlined it.
got it through, so that does not need to be brought back until you're going for the next
To the
appropriation.
manager's
Well,
point,
I
I
don't-
think the video looping through WCTV to get the information out there so people can see it, just so they understand what we're discussing.
Yeah, I, to the point about the appropriation, you know, we were able to get the appropriation for a senior center for this feasibility and schematic design, and we did the same for the town school admin. The town school admin was a much closer vote than the senior center, and I think that's reflective again of the fact that when you have a fired up constituency, you know, you're gonna make your case. You know, we certainly made a case as to why we need these buildings replaced, but I don't think, I still think we need to continue the mantra, continue the message going forward, because there's an element of people that clearly were not at that town meeting, that probably haven't been all that focused on these discussions, and we need to send the message out to them. I think, you know, there may be opportunities at some point here in the next few months to encourage people to come and do a walkthrough, but I think the equally, if not more effective, is getting information out to people, whether it's short snippets on YouTube or, you know, Facebook, whatever mechanisms in short pieces that people can, you know, click on for 10 seconds and they get a bullet point on, you know, one aspect of these buildings. But that really needs to happen, in my estimation, you know, from the beginning of the new year right through to October, whenever that town meeting is, November.
If that's what you,
Okay.
if that's what you believe, we'll get on it.
All right, I think we have that covered.
Yeah, I mean, that's no problem.
All right. That was our next steps in the process. We already talked about future meetings. Did we have any other discussion before I go to public comment?
Is that gonna be the only meeting, George, for the town hall, right?
Right, because the senior center can't do anything until we've decided on the location. But for the permanent building committee, we will be meeting every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday,
Right.
okay.
Every Wednesday is not only Prince Spaghetti Day.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and we'll be alternating, so
So-
this committee will be opposite the school committee meetings, and then the town, the senior center will be meeting same week the school committee meets, so.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little early, isn't it, Jeff, for us to know whether this would be on the agenda for the 10th?
Yeah, I don't know, it's certainly my hope, but that remains to be seen.
If we get the, depending on what happens on our 5th, then I could put a recommendation.
Right.
and
Yeah,
see.
and at that point, the board will have recommendations from both groups, and then, you
Right.
know, confidence there.
Okay.
Okay. Any public comment? George?
You're the only one left?
Yeah, not quite the same, huh?
You're making the town manager's argument about constituencies.
Compared to other ones where we had standing room only. First of all, Phil, excellent presentation.
Thanks.
I think you hit all the key targets, and I think it was very, very clear. I hope a lot of people were watching it on TV. And as far as Jeff's point, I think he's right on target. You've got to sell the town hall. It's going to take a sell job. And one way I think to do it is to make you talk about YouTube or whatever. The best way, in my opinion, to get the word out is to make a presentation at the Board of Selectmen meeting. You know, go through and because nobody's gonna take a tour. Nobody's gonna go through the Roman house other than maybe this committee. The average public, first of all, you can't get many people in there. So, and nobody's gonna take a tour through here. But if there was a presentation at the Board of Selectmen with photos and deficiencies that the people could see, a lot of people watch that program. You'll probably get the best bang for your buck doing that. So, that's number one. But before we can get to that, Jeff, we have to have some decisions on where we're going to put the buildings. And the Board of Selectmen have to make that decision. If they want to move that town hall forward, they got to decide where it's going. And so, you know, that has to happen in January. That'll help your case. If it gets pushed off till February, gonna be problems. So, but that being said, this committee, and hopefully the Board of Selectmen, have a generational opportunity to establish a Wilmington Town Center. A center that everybody can be proud of. This building belongs at the Swain Green. It should be a done deal. This is a no-brainer. You need to put it there. It'll enhance the town common and will give us a town center. So, thank you all. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Jim.
Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, if that's it, and so you have a motion to adjourn? Second. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. You all have a great holiday.
Yes, you
Be
too.
safe with your families and enjoy. John Doherty, seconded by Paul Millerani, and it was unanimous.
Paul Credit.
WCTV, connecting our community.